Business Stories live from the Sky News City studio. The government sets out its plan for the coming year, including legislation on oil and gas licences, self-driving cars and leasehold and rental reform. As UK spending slows in the build-up to Christmas, I'll be joined by the chief executive of the department store operator Fenwick. Plus, can artificial intelligence reduce the need for lawyers in contract negotiations? Good afternoon, this is Business Live with me, Ian King. His Majesty the King has laid out Rishi Sunak's legislative plans for the coming year at the state opening of Parliament. In his speech, the King said the government was focused on increasing economic growth with a renewed promise to bring down inflation. Among the announcements were an annual system to award new oil and gas licences previously trailed. There were proposals to phase out smoking by raising the legal age people can buy cigarettes every year, again previously announced. And there was also a bill ensuring that all new houses in England and Wales are sold as freehold properties, phasing out leaseholds. There was also legislation to allow driverless cars to operate on the roads for the first time without safety drivers. And there are plans for a football regulator and licensing system to scrutinise clubs' owners and their financial resources. Well, our business correspondent, Paul Kelso, is at Westminster. I mean, Paul, not untypical of the response I've had from businesses today was this one from the Institute of Directors, which said there was not much in this to address the direct concerns of business leaders. I mean, it's a bit of a non-event, frankly, wasn't it?
Yeah, of the 21 bills that were in the King's speech today, and we might say half a dozen of them we might consider to be business-facing. You've run through some of them there, but most of them were already in train. Many of them are pretty technical. They'll concern the people in the back offices, and none of them really go to the heart of the business and economic challenges that the King said his government was focused on. The Prime Minister, again, said that we've heard the now familiar boilerplate about bringing down inflation and encouraging growth, but these bills, the data and digital bills, they're technical. They'll deal with data protection and what replaces GDPR. Post-Brexit, there's putting the Pacific trade deal, perhaps the largest of the post-Brexit wins, as the government would style it, putting that into law. So that'll give companies in Mexico and Canada access to government procurement should they wish to pursue it. That kind of stuff. The North Sea oil and gas annual licence is seen as more of a gimmick, perhaps, to trap Labour than really opening up any kind of new and really significant front in terms of energy supply. It does feel a little like we're in a holding pattern. This speech hasn't really pushed us forward in terms of new policy. And actually, 2 weeks tomorrow, when the Chancellor gives his autumn statement, might be the moment there'll be a little more for business to chew over. That given the state of the public finances, and this is a government that does feel like it is in a holding pattern ahead of next year's election, whether the Chancellor is is minded or indeed has the ammunition to start doing anything to really trigger growth or meet the demands and the concerns of business, well, that remains to be seen.
OK, Paul, thanks for that. UK retail and consumer spending slowed last month to rates well below inflation, suggesting households have been cutting back ahead of the build-up to Christmas. Well, the retail sales monitor produced by the British Retail Consortium and KPMG found that total retail sales increased by 2.5% in October. That was up from growth of 1.6% in October last year, but was below the 3-month average growth of 3.1% and the 12-month average growth of 4.2%. Within that, non-food sales were down 1% on the 3 months to October. Well, joining me now is John Edgar. He's Chief Executive of Fenwick, the family-owned department store operator. John, welcome to you. Hi. Do these numbers tally with what you've been seeing up and down the country?
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, I mean, we're slightly protected from that. We have 9 stores operating as dominant in the markets that they operate in, so we're slightly protected from the big highs and the big drops. But, you know, it's certainly this year, it's been what I would call a lumpy year. Weather hasn't helped. Obviously, the other economic factors around consumer spending and mortgage rates definitely impacted the customers a little bit.
Are you seeing much regional variances?
So where we are really, really dominant in places like Newcastle, we're performing very, very well. I think some of our smaller stores, less good, but, you know, if you've got 2 stores, you've got an overperformance and an underperformance, so there's always some variances in that. Yeah. But as I said, our premium offer puts us in a very commanding position in those locations. So we're fortunate from that perspective.
Obviously, John Lewis have closed a number of sites over the last 12 to 18 months. Have you benefited from that at all?
I think there have been some benefits that we've got from whether it's John Lewis or Debenhams or House of Fraser closing in some locations in some of the categories, notably beauty, actually. And we're fortunate to be on the receiving end of that. Yeah.
What's struck me looking at your recent numbers is that you've been very careful not to discount over recent months. Why is that?
Yeah. So I mean, for me, if you're offering a differentiated product, you shouldn't have to discount because the product itself will sell. We're giving something that you can't generally get elsewhere, therefore we don't have to compete so much on price. Discounting has its place. We didn't do a mid-season sale this year. Others did. Our stock is well controlled, so we don't feel we have to. But there will be elements of discount in our business, and that's fine and that's normal, but we won't go down that route.
Obviously, one of the priorities for you since you became CEO was to step up the online offering.
Yeah.
What is online now as part of the total sales
So
mix?
we're high single digits as a percentage of the mix, but we've only really launched it 2.5 years ago, so we're still growing quite significantly, which is not necessarily what you're seeing in the rest of the market.
Does having a comparatively small store estate compared with the likes of John Lewis, does that inhibit you in any way when it comes to things like click and collect?
Not really, no. I think our catchment areas are fairly significant. We do a good percentage of our business on click and collect. I think it benefits us in many other ways. We're fortunate we own our property. We have a considered estate, so we don't have too many stores, and it helps us control and focus on the offer that we want to give.
What's really interesting, though, is that whilst there has been a moderation in spending, your consumers, it's fair to say, are probably better off than average?
Slightly, but there's still factors that affect them. Mortgage rates probably affect that customer more than utility bills, for example, and so that still has some way to play out. And it would be naive not to acknowledge that. But yeah, relatively protected.
Do you think the full impact of the mortgage increases that we've had thus far, interest rate rises that we've had so far, have been felt?
I think, as I understand it, there's still, months to go at least in terms of people coming off their fixed rate mortgages and the impact that will have. So I think there's some road to go until that fully unwinds.
So what are you expecting to see over Christmas? What's the trade going to be like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty confident. Christmas happens every year, thank goodness for retailers like us. I think there's this pent-up excitement from a bit like we saw in the pandemic where, Christmas was very big between the lockdowns, etc. I think we will see elements of that. We launched our Christmas shops a few weeks ago and they're already trading better than last year. We launched our windows in Newcastle, which is a big event up there at the weekend, and that's really the kick-off for us to Christmas, and I'm looking forward to it. Our stores are well-staffed, well-stocked, and are great places to be.
Had we been having this conversation 12 months ago or 24 months ago, you'd have probably been talking about supply chain issues post-COVID, opening of lockdowns and so on. Is that an issue at all this year?
Not for us at all this year. I mean, we had some issues in some of the categories a couple of years ago, maybe a bit less than others. But this year, we're not seeing any of that. And in fact, container costs have come down quite significantly, which should benefit prices going into next year as well.
An encouraging note on which to end. John, good to see you this afternoon. Thank you. Some other business news stories for you now. And the owner of Primark said today that the discount retailer would be adding 1 million square feet of selling space during the next year. Associated British Foods said that in the year to the 16th of September, Primark sales rose by 15% to £9 billion and were up by 8.5% on a like-for-like basis. That's the measure that strips out new store openings and refurbishments. Sales growth was most rapid in the United States, where Primark opened 8 new stores during the year and where it's targeting 60 outlets by 2026. Well, ABF's adjusted pre-tax profits for the year came in at £1.473 billion, which was up 9% on the previous year. The company said its grocery business, which includes brands such as Twinings, Ovaltine, Blue Dragon, Patak's and Jordan's, have performed with great resilience in what were challenging inflationary conditions. The shares have been up by more than 7.5% today. Persimmon said today that its headcount was likely to fall by around 700 this year as a result of a hiring freeze. The news came as the UK's fourth largest house builder by stock market value said it expected to build more homes this year than previously expected. It now anticipates delivering around 9,500 new homes in 2023, ahead of the 9,000 total completions it was forecasting in the summer. But that would still be down 16% on last year and down 13% on 2021. Persimmon added that into 2024, it anticipated that market conditions would remain highly uncertain. Shares of Persimmon, though, have been as much as 4.5% higher today. And average UK house prices in October were up 1.1% on September, breaking a run of 6 consecutive monthly falls, according to Halifax. But the UK's biggest mortgage lender said that on a year-on-year basis, prices were down 3.2%, although that decline was at a slower pace than the 4.5% reverse seen in September. Well, separately today, the estate agency Foxtons said it is buying the lettings agency Ludlow Thompson for £10 million. The move further builds Foxtons' position in lettings, which already account for 70% of its sales. Now, we're constantly hearing about how artificial intelligence is going to transform the world of work, but today brings evidence of how that transformation is already underway. A tool developed by Luminance, the Cambridge-based AI company, has completely automated the negotiation of a contract between two opposing parties without human intervention. As general counsel and in-house lawyers typically spend 80% of their time reviewing and negotiating contracts, it promises to revolutionise the legal world. Well, joining me now to talk about this is Jaeger Glicina, Chief of Staff and Managing Director at Luminance. Jaeger, welcome back. Was this a real live contract or was it a simulation?
It was basically AI negotiating with AI for the very first time. And I should start by saying thank you so much for having me back. It's such a pleasure. The last 6 months have gone very quickly. When I last sat in this chair, it was all about talking about the launch of our AI-powered legal-grade chatbot, Ask Lumi, which was, I guess, supporting our core product in allowing lawyers who come into contact with contracts across every part of the business to use it as their sort of co-pilot in their everyday work. But as you rightly said, what we're talking today about is this future of AI, the next step. And that's where we talk about Luminance Autopilot. So for the very first time, it is taking away that contract negotiation that lawyers go through every day. It's totally automating it. So it's AI negotiating with AI with no human in the loop, until that human lawyer decides it's time to sign the contract.
So you still need them to do that?
You do, and I think we want to keep it that way for now.
But how easily can humans monitor what's going on in the negotiations?
Really easily, and I think this is a very, very important distinction to make. When it comes to AI and lawyers, lawyers like to have control. So in the background, while the AIs are negotiating with each other, they're actually recording every move that they make so that the lawyer has that audit trail to refer to at any point in that negotiation. And of course, they have the option to check that they're happy with what the AIs have come up with before they go and sign. That's very important.
So the lawyer can actually jump in if they're concerned at any moment?
They can, and they don't have to sign the contract at the end of the process, so it's always within their control. But, of course, part of this is coming up with an AI that's legally accurate, that can be trusted, and that's what we've been focusing on doing over the years. So we have built an LLM, which is a specialist in the field of law, and that makes it very different from the likes of the very generalist AIs out there, the very generalist LLMs that we've heard about. ChatGPT is just one. There are many large language models. Thank you. So it's important in the specialist field of law to have that very specialist, legally trained AI. So you think about Luminance's LLM as very similar to the lawyer who goes through years of training and then a training contract, and then they get out there and they gain everyday experience working in real life situations. Our LLM's essentially done the same thing. We've had years where it's been sitting aside lawyers, supporting them with their contract negotiations. So it's gone through the all-important training and then that everyday life experience where it's being used in all types of reviews.
So while you've been talking, we've actually been showing how it worked on the screen. Now, how long did the whole negotiation process take?
I think it was over in about 5 minutes. Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty quick for an NDA.
I was going to say, presumably that will get even quicker once machine learning kicks in.
Exactly, because what this AI is doing, it's not only understanding the history of how a business has negotiated contracts in the past, so it's using its already trained understanding of the law and then combining that with a business's own standards to do something very powerful, which is negotiate on their behalf.
So this was an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. How long would it take in the real world to do that?
It was a real-life NDA, so I would expect about 5 minutes, but...
But if it was humans, not
Oh, if it
AI.
were humans, absolutely. So, I mean, I talk with our customers every single day. It can be anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours to actually spend on an NDA. But in reality, if you're a business user submitting an NDA to the legal team because you need a deal done, you might not get that contract back for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because the legal team's busy, and that's the reality. So we're reducing that down to about 5 minutes.
All right. Yeah, you've got to leave it there. Great to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Still to come here on Business Live, we'll have a look at how the markets have done this Tuesday afternoon. Stay with us.
She's absolutely fantastic. Hopefully you can see her there behind me. She's looking a lot lighter than she was yesterday. She's had the wool off her now and she's in tremendous health. Absolutely fantastic. She had a full check over with SSPCA after the rescue, and you would almost say she's overweight. In sheep terms, she's in incredible condition. When I saw the story breaking, a lady named Jill Turner was kayaking and had put this post on that then went viral, and I was reading the comments about how negative it was about the farmers not caring and you know, making it out that it was leaving this sheep to die. And that's when I reached out to the farmer and asked for the real story of what was happening and how it was so dangerous to get this sheep up. There was a real risk to life. And I thought, what crazy people do I know that would come and take a little risk with me and see if we can rescue Fiona here and get her back up and get her somewhere safe. So I contacted Graham, and initially contacted Graham and Alistair here. And then I thought we could really do a secret weapon, and that's when we got Ali here from the Isle of Lewis. He's a
mountain goat.
Mountain goat is correct. he does
one
things like this every week, but it doesn't make the news.
Carmi actually contacted me because he thought I might have a boat. We thought that might be the most safe way to actually extract her from where she was. But we soon realised that actually it would be safer, quicker and easier and better for Fiona, as she's now called, to take her up the hillside, and that's exactly what we did in the finish up, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As safely as possible. And it was incredible how she actually managed the journey. We thought she would be stressed out, and we thought we would worry about her safety, and clearly we did worry about her safety, but it was absolutely incredible how relaxed she was throughout the whole thing, wasn't it?
Oh, man. Yeah. We have a great little bit of footage of her nibbling grass on the way up. I've worked with sheep my entire life, never seen anything like it.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
This is the game changer seat. Look, it even comes with binoculars. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Well, the oil price has sold off sharply this afternoon on news that Chinese exports during October contracted at a more rapid rate than expected. At one point, Brent crude was trading at its lowest level since the 25th of August. Currently, a barrel of Brent is changing hands at $82.62 a barrel. That's down 3% on the session. On the equity market, stocks in Europe have been largely in negative territory today. The big story in Europe, actually, has been the unexpected resignation of the Portuguese Prime Minister, Antonio Costa, amid a corruption scandal. The Portuguese stock market is off by 3% on that news. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 has finished very slightly lower, off 0.1%, with the oil majors weighing on the index. BP and Shell together clipped 18 points from the index, so the FTSE would have finished in positive territory were it not for the impact of those two. Associated British Foods was the leading blue chip gainer in percentage terms, up nearly 7%, while the Lloyds of London insurer Beazley, that finished up 7% on a trading update. Elsewhere, the house builders Barratt and Taylor Wimpey both finished in positive territory. That was on the back of the statement from Persimmon. Outside the FTSE 100, a clutch of stocks are up on the back of better than expected trading results. Updates, they include Watches of Switzerland, which rose by 12%. Direct Line, which, as you can see on the screen there, was 8% ahead. And Hilton Food Group. Over on Wall Street, all of the main stock indices are higher this afternoon. Talking points include KKR. The private equity firm is up nearly 5% after its trading update was well received. On the foreign exchange markets, the big talking point today has been the Australian dollar, which fell sharply after the country's central bank indicated that interest rates there have peaked. The pound has also been under pressure after Hugh Pill, the Bank of England's chief economist, indicated late last night that the bank may consider interest rate cuts in the middle of next year. Sterling off by nearly 0.2% against the dollar. It's also off by 0.1% against the euro. The single currency, meanwhile, off by just over 0.25% against the greenback. Well, with me this afternoon is Natasha Ebterhash. She's the Global Equities Manager at Artemis. Natasha, great to see you. Let's start with ABF, because these were really quite stunning results under the circumstances.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Investors very happy with the results. I think particularly impressed by how pricing, what they managed to put through good pricing in a quite a difficult environment. So really showing that kind of value for money and quality offering has really resonated with the consumer. Also on the margins as well, they managed to control costs. Freight costs have come down, raw materials, they all helped to contribute to good profits. So what we could say, and plus they sweetened it all with by doing a share buyback as well. So the consumer and that segment doing well.
Now, they're called Associated British Foods, but if you look at their operating profits by segment, I mean, retail and Primark is by far the biggest part of the business now. Shouldn't they think about a name change?
I think that would probably be, I think it could be helpful for just so that we know what it does. But they're a collection of lots of different segments. So maybe pulling back to their heritage more than anything.
Yeah, so family-controlled companies, they know what they
Exactly.
like, really, aren't they? Over in the US, of course, overnight, we had the filing for bankruptcy protection of WeWork. I mean, this really is a sort of riches to rags story, isn't it?
Yes, I know. It's a very spectacular fall. At one point, they were the biggest office tenant in the whole of Manhattan, and now filing for bankruptcy. To be honest, it's really a case of simple economics 101 here. They took on too many costs, so signed a lot of expensive leases, prime locations at the peak of the market, 2018, 2019. And then the pandemic hit, a lot of that demand fell away. And even though that now they are back to 2019 levels of demand, struggled to control those costs, struggled to control the debt, and so have had to file for bankruptcy. But potentially, while WeWork may be somewhat unique in that it had a very aggressive operating strategy, growth at any cost nearly, we could be starting to see the tip of the iceberg of problems in the commercial real estate market. So like WeWork, other commercial real estate offices struggling with workers going back to the office, businesses downsizing what they need for in terms of business office space, and then you also see higher interest rates hitting that segment as well. So and banks pulling back from wanting to give loans. So all in all, a storm is brewing there.
Do you worry about the fallout for the wider commercial real estate sector here? Because obviously, a lot of the properties that they occupied are going to have to be vacated now.
Potentially. I mean, I don't think that all the offices will close. I think there'll be a restructuring. So some of the locations will be kept, and some of maybe the more expensive leases will be let go. But there will be an increase in supply, and that again could weigh on the commercial real estate segment.
Now, the earnings updates keep coming thick and fast on both sides of the Atlantic. I mean, so far, this has actually been a pretty good earnings season, hasn't it?
Yeah, so far. I mean, I was watching a weather forecast earlier, and how I'd characterise it in those kind of contexts would be, I think Europe, you can still see some storm clouds hanging over Europe, whereas the US has been quite sunny, but with storm clouds brewing on the horizon. And why I say that, actually, European earnings have been quite weak. We've seen for the quarter just passed, and we're about 2/3 of the way through reporting season, about a 16% fall in earnings year on year. So really, some companies struggling, those cyclical companies in Europe struggling. But in the US, actually, we're about 4/5 of the way through earnings season, and there, earnings have grown by 3%. So, but why do I say storm clouds are brewing? Well, in the management commentaries and the outlooks that they've been providing, they're saying that actually some companies have seen quite a sharp slowdown in September to October, and then going into fourth quarter and the outlooks for next year, they are more cautious, and we've seen that that kind of commentary has weighed on the share prices of some companies.
Yeah, and you can already get a flavour of that, I guess, with these Chinese export figures that came out overnight.
Well, exactly, yeah. So Chinese exports down 6.4% year on year for the month of October, so showing that actually consumer demand isn't so strong in the Western economies, and that's weighed on China. I mean, exports were the engine of growth for the Chinese economy, plus China's grappling as well with a domestic housing slowdown and a consumer that's just not so confident, partly because of this economic backdrop. So yes, problems there.
All right, Natasha, got to leave it there. Great to see you. Thank you. That's it from me. I'm back at 11:30 tomorrow morning with our next edition. Do stay tuned, though, because up next, it's Jonathan Samuels with the NewsHour. Thanks for joining me today. Cheerio.